It's been just over 1 month since I picked up the new Extracycle RFA. I love this bike. I've put over 100 miles on it already, just running errands around the neighborhood, and riding the RFA has been so much fun. It has totally changed my life. But I get it. What if you live in a place where cars are king? Maybe you're wondering how an e-cargo bike can change your life. That's why I spoke to Riley, a dad from Tucson, Arizona. Even though he and his wife had been biking for transportation for years, having 2 growing kids meant he found himself driving more than he wanted to.
I was driving my kids 10 miles round trip, twice a day, in traffic, in a car, and it really wasn't good for me. I could feel that driving and being in traffic, I didn't feel good doing it, and I also felt like I was doing my kids a disservice, having them cooped up in a car, on main roads and in traffic. When I was driving a lot, I just thought, like, I can't do this year round.
As the kids got bigger, Riley and his wife faced a choice, and they decided to make biking work for their family.
We had just one car that we shared, and we didn't want to have a second car. So it felt cheaper to own an Extracycle with e-assist. It's also a lot cheaper to maintain. It costs almost nothing once you get it. There's no insurance or oil changes or anything like that. The other reason we decided to spend the money was quality of life. It really is different to commute on a bicycle and get exercise and have fresh air and the wind in your face, and be moving slower and seeing the world around you and getting to know the city in a different way, and also not being stuck in traffic, which I think almost everyone would say is not a pleasant experience in most cases. So it was a quality of life thing. It was a big decision, and we were not sure it would be worth it when we did it, but it really was. Almost immediately we felt like this is really great.
Riley opted for the Swoop, which Extracycle bills as the ultimate kid hauler.
We chose the Extracycle Swoop Cargo e-assist bike because as a family of 4, it was the most versatile. So it has a step-through frame. My wife is 5'5", I'm 6'1". It makes it easier for everyone to get on and off. The seat can raise or lower quite a long ways to accommodate both of us, so it's comfortable to ride for my wife and me. The back bench is quite long and comfortable for 2 kids and even 3 kids. And it was, without a doubt, the perfect thing. We could pile the kids on all their stuff, and I could fly, no problem, 5 miles with all of us on the bike. We actually weren't that much slower than we'd be in a car, in a very car-centric city. And we felt a lot better. The kids loved it. And I'd return home and I'd feel great.
In a place like Tucson, the Extracycle Swoop turns heads.
When we ride and show up on the electric assist cargo bike, lots of people ask questions about it and want to know about it. And what I like about the cargo bike is it's easy to take everyone and everything with you on the bike. You're not struggling to fit in backpacks or groceries or people. It makes it really easy, and I think a lot of people choose a car because they think I can just throw everything in this car that I need. And the cargo bike is the response to that for the bike world. It makes it easier to choose because you don't have to think too hard about what you're gonna bring or not bring. That's one thing that I really love about the cargo bike.
And you know who else loves it? Riley's kids.
My kids love riding the bike to school. My daughter, I remember one of the first times we rode to school, she spread her arms out wide and just said something like, "This is the best way to get to school." And so yeah, they really enjoy it. They prefer it, and if it's possible to go by bike, that's what they choose.
We here at the War on Cars choose to go by bike when we can too. And we want everyone to enjoy the benefits of cargo biking, whether to reduce or even relieve the need for cars in your life. Head to extracycle.com/thewaroncars and take the 1-minute ride guide. It's a quiz that'll help you find out which Extracycle bike is best for you. And if you decide to purchase a bike, you'll save $500 by using promo code WARONCARS500. Again, that's Extracycle, extracycle.com/thewaroncars. Find out how an e-cargo bike can change your life with Extra Cycle. This is The War on Cars. I'm Doug Gordon. Before we get started, a quick note. As we've mentioned before, we have a new book coming out. It's called Life After Cars, Freeing Ourselves from the Tyranny of the Automobile. And it's coming out in October from Thesis, an imprint of Penguin Random House. We're really excited about the book, and to celebrate, we're doing a big live show at the Bell House here in Brooklyn, right in our backyard. Tickets for that show will go on sale very soon, possibly next week, and pre-sale access will be given first to our Patreon supporters. To become a member, visit patreon.com/thewaroncarspod, and you'll be the first to know when the pre-sale is open. You can also visit lifeaftercars.com to pre-order the book and stay updated on our North American tour. If you can't make it to Brooklyn, we will hopefully be in a city near you. We can't wait. A couple of weeks ago, our friend Alyssa Walker was a guest on the weekly Netflix show Everybody's Live with John Mulaney. John Mulaney's show is a kind of absurdist homage to classic late-night talk shows like the Johnny Carson version of The Tonight Show, The Dick Cavett Show, and The Merv Griffin Show. Kids, ask your grandparents about him. Alyssa, a Los Angeles-based journalist who's been on the transportation beat for years, was there as an expert to help with the show's nominal subject, Is Uber Good? Now, I'm a big fan of John Mulaney's, and I enjoy Everybody's Live. So when someone I know, like Alyssa, is on a show like that, you can be sure I'm going to watch. Well, it didn't take long before the conversation turned to bikes. Actress Natasha Lyonne, another guest on the program, basically hijacked things to bash bike lanes like a common NIMBY. After the show, Gersh Kuntzman, the editor of Streets Blog, asked for my take on it. I'll link to the resulting piece in the show notes. As part of writing it, I reached out to Alissa Walker, but rather than waste the opportunity and just get a few quotes, I decided to get a little deeper with Alyssa and turn the interview into an episode. Some of the things I wanted to talk about were why do smart people say unintelligent things about bikes? Why is it that conversations about transportation almost always descend into people complaining about cyclists, even if the original subject of the conversation has nothing to do with bikes? How do we, as advocates fighting for safe streets and rational solutions, reclaim the narrative from people with high profiles but low knowledge on the issues we live and breathe? It is always fun to talk to Alyssa Walker. You can listen to the interview after this quick break.
It's been kind of a rainy few months here in the part of the world where I live, and as a result, I've been wearing a lot of Cleverhood, especially my new Zipster jacket. It's bright and reflective and gives you such great coverage when you're on a bike, but it also keeps you dry when you're out walking. As a matter of fact, I find that I'm not using an umbrella much anymore at all, just throwing on my Cleverhood and heading out to meet the day. You can get 15% off everything in the Cleverhood store now through the end of June if you use the code JUNEBUG at cleverhood.com/waroncars. That's Junebug at cleverhood.com/waroncars. Wear a Cleverhood and leave the umbrella at home.
Alyssa Walker is the editor of Torched.la, a news site that covers the civic investments and policy decisions Los Angeles is making in preparation for the 2028 Olympic Games, among other upcoming mega events. She's been a staff writer for Gizmodo, Curbed, and New York Magazine, and co-hosts the LA podcast. She's also a friend of The War on Cars. Alyssa, I believe you last appeared on the show on episode 19, which was 6 years ago.
Wow.
If you can believe that. All right, so welcome back, Alyssa Walker, to The War on Cars.
Thank you for having me, Doug.
Well, let's back this up. Okay, so you were a guest on Everybody's Live with John Mulaney on Netflix. That was on Wednesday, May 21st. I have to admit, when I saw your social media posts and other things about it, it was a little surreal to see something to the effect of Amy Sedaris, Sigourney Weaver, Natasha Lyonne, and public transit advocate Alyssa Walker. How did you feel appearing on the show?
Well, the most exciting part was when you're backstage and you see the credits start to roll, which, at the beginning, the opening sequence, and I got the Inherent Vice lockup. So I was so excited to see my name like right there on the screen at that exact moment. But I didn't know who was going to be on it until like the day before. So I had agreed to join, and then I think they book everybody else, and I don't know how it exactly works, but I didn't know who I was going to be with until like 24 hours before the show aired. So I was very excited.
I don't know. Sigourney Weaver, obviously one of the biggest stars of the 20th century and today. I mean
my
Ghostbusters,
childhood,
Avatar, Alien, everything.
Yeah, I mean,
Working
literally
Girl.
everything. Yeah, my kids were pumped. And so were my parents, I guess, appealing to all generations.
I would have lost it a little bit being on stage with her, on the set with her. Yeah. So how did this come about? What did the producers say when they reached out to you? What did they want to talk to you about?
Yeah, so shout out to Molly Lambert and Kelly Casey, who have worked on the show for a while, and they, I guess they set the theme, and the themes are just so arbitrary. It seems like I had watched the whole LA series that he did last year, which I thought was so good. It was really. It was like kind of this like moment of togetherness, I felt like, for the city, where everybody was watching it every day because they did a show every day for a week. It was quite fun and very well like researched and very well like produced. And so when I saw that they were going to be bringing the show back, it's like now it's weekly. The topics are, they're just a little bit. They're not about LA, right? But this one was interesting because they said the topic was going to be about Uber, and I was like, oh, interesting, Uber. I was like, okay, and then the I guess the angle was, is Uber good? And they asked if I had any thoughts about that as a transportation reporter, and I said I did have thoughts about that. So
you've been covering this for a long time, so
for 15 years probably. Yeah,
I'm sure you had many thoughts, and very few of them actually made it onto the episode in the end, which we're going to talk about. So, all right. So I want to actually preface this conversation. I was talking about my love for Sigourney Weaver, and you were saying how excited you were. I think John Mulaney is perhaps the funniest and smartest comedian working in Hollywood, in entertainment today. I mean, he's really just been having a moment, as they say. He's all over the place. He was on the SNL 50th special. He's sort of like the modern incarnation of Steve Martin, which is maybe not the best way to say it because Steve Martin is very much alive. But he's got that like younger, wittier, just very smart. I don't know. There's just something about him that is very of the moment, and he's brilliant. So we should put that out there. I think sometimes, when we break these things down, we don't want to be seen as humorless scolds.
No, and I think the thing to remember is that it's it's not even really a talk show. It's like a comedy show. So it's not there. No one's there to actually talk about real subjects or like even talk about their work or what they're working on. It's like it's a comedy show, and you do have a full dress rehearsal. Like I got to go, I got there and you do a full stage, like on the stage dress rehearsal, where, he asked a lot of really good questions. He seemed to be familiar with the material and very interested in like what I wrote about and talking about transportation. So he definitely, I thought was quite thoughtful. And I also think, when you think about who your audience is for too, right? I mean, it's like, the fact that I was with New Yorkers, I was immediately like, oh, we can actually really talk about, we don't have to go over all the other stuff that we like normally talk about when I'm talking about transportation in LA, but then it kind of reverted to the same stereotypes anyway. So it was just so surreal.
So you get out there, you're introduced talk show style.
As I mentioned, tonight's topic is Uber good? ? I'm joined tonight as a resource, as a source and expert on this by public transit advocate Alyssa Walker. Give her a big hand. Alyssa, Thank you for being here as a reference point, as someone with a lot of knowledge of the topic for us to bounce questions off of, for my callers to speak to, and we very much appreciate that you're here.
And pretty much right away, Mulaney asks you the question about Uber, is Uber good? And then stops and says, wait a minute, how did you get here today to the studio?
Yeah.
Before we begin, you are a public transit advocate, so not so much an Uber fan?
I would say that it's good that we have options to get around, especially ones that we can access from our phones. But cars haven't done a very good job with that historically.
Okay.
So Uber is actually like contributing to the problem in a way by investing millions.
So wait, how did you get to the show tonight?
I took public transit.
You took LA public transit?
Of course I did.
That's fucking wild. Like the bus?
The bus and the train.
Took the train. This is a dystopian nightmare. Wow.
You always go back in these instances where you're like, oh, I was going in your mind of like a million things to say back. And yeah, I had something in my mind to say about like, well, the real dystopian nightmare is, getting stuck in the 405. But you're not really, in these situations, you're not really there to make jokes, right? Like I'm the expert. So it wasn't my job to, crack up the other people. It was my job to just laugh. And I obviously was just taken aback a little bit by his response because I just thought, it seemed like, the literal Walking in LA like song by Missing Persons, which I've done a radio segment on and like went back through all those clips. Like on The Tonight Show, they used to make jokes about how people got, or were not allowed to walk, in LA. And so it was so expected, and I was like legitimately laughing, like it was really funny. And then it was just like, my time was over. So
Right, and you were at the far end of the couch, almost in sort of like
really far away.
Yes,
exurban. And also, like, I think it's important to remember too, like, of course, I don't think that transit is a punchline. I don't think it was like, I don't think it's a joke about taking transit in LA. But I was also like, just really happy that he asked. I was really glad that he asked me how I got there. So it was my chance to say, yeah, I did not take the car service. I did not take the black SUV that your production company offered me. I just took the train. It was the easiest way to get there, bus and the train.
And I can offer a defense of the LA Metro. I took it when I was there in September. I did not rent a car. I took the bus and the train, and it's quite pleasant. It's actually really nice, and the Metro stations are very nice. They're staffed by lovely Metro employees who will help you get where you're going, and it's safe and very nice. As a New Yorker, I liked it.
That's right. Yes. Thanks for the endorsement, Doug.
First guest is Amy Sedaris. She comes on. She tells a story about a cab driver who's like constantly stopping and spitting. I've had cab drivers like this. It's a total talk show anecdote sort of thing, like nothing that special. Then Sigourney Weaver comes out.
I'm so excited to be here on your fantastic show.
Thank you.
And she talks about how she prefers the old school New York City yellow cabs. She's old school.
I didn't realize this, but both of you are New Yorkers. We're talking about transportation, and you're from the most transported city in the world.
Absolutely.
You've lived your whole life in Manhattan?
I'm born and bred, yes.
Wow.
Yeah, I think it's a great place to grow up, a great place to raise a kid.
And when you're there, do you take Uber?
I have strong feelings.
Share them, please.
I am New York taxi all the way.
Oh, wow.
Listen, if you need to take an Uber, fine, but we have to preserve this great tradition.
So at this point, nothing really weird is happening. This just seems like total normal talk show banter, nothing too special, right? Then Natasha Lyonne comes out.
She is an actor, writer, director, auteur, and gonzo journalist. Please welcome the one and only Natasha Lyonne.
This is where things start to go off the rails. Natasha Lyonne hijacks the conversation to make it all about bicycles.
Do you fuck with Uber, Natasha?
Do I fuck with Uber? No. I fuck with Delancey Car Service. Remember them?
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, Delancey, you said? Yeah. They're still around.
I take an Uber. Of course I do. What I don't fuck with is bicycles.
Oh,
New
yeah.
York, I think we need to shut down the bike lanes. Do you agree, Sigourney?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And no one gets along transportation-wise.
Yeah.
Bikes, rollerblades, no one gets
And they
along.
don't use the bike lanes anyway. They
Right.
use the curbs and
yeah.
you know.
Some weird
Sidewalk.
kamikaze
Yeah.
move of Bill de Blasio that he made the bike lane the bus lane. It's
I
like,
mean, speaking as Eric Adams' ex-wife, I just want to say
God.
I'm so glad we're in alignment on this because we got to get rid of those bicycles.
And
Yeah.
get rid of the electric bicycles.
Yes.
They're the
Oh,
worst.
yeah, they're
You
bad.
said
They're killers.
are they a big...
And just for context at the end there, that is Richard Kind, who is basically Mulaney's like Ed McMahon sidekick on this show. Love Richard Kind, very funny guy, also a New Yorker. So Alyssa, at this point, I thought to myself, take away the lights, the makeup, the set, the famous names, the studio audience, and you just have a DOT presentation with an expert, let's say you, talking about a new plan for the city for how to better manage car sharing, let's say, and people just suddenly scream, but what about the bicycles? And the electric bicycles, they're killers. I was almost hit and killed 5 times yesterday. What was your reaction at this point?
Well, it goes back again to like the whole premise just felt like it was 2010, and I really was like, we're talking about like Ubers and like we started talking about scooters, which I brought up. So we were talking about bikes, bike lanes, Uber, and scooters. I was like, it's like we're getting into like the 20 teens or whatever we call them, right? But what was really going through my mind kind of as the conversation started to drift. So at the very beginning of every episode, they have these quotes that kind of like frame the theme, which we know is like a loose theme. And this one was like a quote from Travis Kalanick that was like, we're going to take over the world. And then the second quote was from a Guardian story that was like, Uber robotaxi kills Arizona pedestrian. So I was like, this is opening up the door to talk about safety. But at the same time, I was like, I'm in this situation with New Yorkers, like they must know what congestion pricing is. And actually, Richard Kind and I had talked about it during the dress rehearsal. And he said he loved it. He said he rides the buses and the trains. And so we had a little conversation about it. And I was like, I think in the back of my mind, I was like, I think I need to try to talk about congestion pricing on this show. And then I was like, all right, I think I can do that. But then by the time we're getting to bike lanes, I was like, oh, we gotta walk. I gotta walk all the way back, like through like the safety stuff, or else it's gonna make it seem as soon as you're trying to frame it as like nobody should have lanes or we shouldn't have bike lanes. I was like, oh, do I have to really explain all this? And then the audience is from LA, so I'm like, are they even going to care about any of this that I'm going to talk about if I bring up congestion pricing? But I was like, surely they know what it is and that it's helping, right? So,
you bring up an important point that you brought up a little earlier, which is if you were to read a transcript of this conversation, you remove the names and some of the locations. And then you asked, okay, who in this transcript is the New Yorker and who are the people from Los Angeles?
Right.
You'd have it totally backwards. You would think that you, Alyssa Walker, were the New Yorker who took transit, and that the other folks, the big Hollywood celebrities, were the Los Angelinos who drive or are driven everywhere. And I thought that was just so interesting because you had John Mulaney, who is very much associated with New York City despite all of his love for Los Angeles.
Sure, of course.
Sigourney Weaver, of course, as we said, born and raised. Natasha Lyonne, who is like the living embodiment of like a 70-year-old New York City native, even though she's 46. Just that voice of hers as a New York City character all by itself. And then Richard Kind, of course. And even Amy Sedaris, who didn't get into it quite as much as the others. But it was basically like 5 New Yorkers versus you. And you were the only one standing up for things like bike lanes and transit, which I found very interesting.
Yeah, and you always just go back and look at these situations, and you're like, oh, I could have said this or whatever. Like being on live TV is really hard that way. But it was funny to me that they got so much more mad every time I said bike lanes. And so I probably said it again because it it was getting such a reaction out of them. So the second time I was like, we need extra wide bike lanes. So I'm sure I was doing it too.
The bus should have a lane. The bike should have its own very wide lane.
No,
And then there should be a
these
wider
wide
sidewalk.
bike lanes. It's Manhattan. We don't have the space.
What about
we
a
don't
wider
have the space.
sidewalk, though?
But you're talking about the model town from Beetlejuice where everything's perfect. That's not happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did love that it was point, counterpoint, point, no bike lanes, counterpoint, extra wide bike lanes. Yeah, exactly. That really was great. I mean, look, we totally could riff on this all day. I mean, I think it's important to put in this context. Richard Kind saying e-bikes are killers. Natasha Lyonne saying get rid of all the bike lanes. Like we said, this just sounds like old school, cranky New Yorkers at a community board meeting circa 2011. But it's important to throw some stats in here. According to the DOT in New York City, e-bikes, scooters, and mopeds account for 1.8% of the 449 ped fatalities between 2020 to 2023, and roughly 4.5% of the nearly 30,000 pedestrian injuries over the same period. So in other words, cars and truck drivers are causing 98% of fatalities and 96% of injuries. And I think this is obviously the part of the conversation where I should say we shouldn't pretend that this is not a problem just because it's an insignificant one. I think a smart city should be capable of solving multiple problems at once with the proper proportion that each problem demands.
That's a very good way to put it.
Yeah. And part of the problem that we're having in the city right now is everything seems wildly out of proportion. We have a massive police crackdown with criminal summons given out to e-bike riders and other bicycle riders. Meanwhile, you blow a red light in your car, it's just a traffic ticket. Again, don't want to say that e-bikes aren't a problem. People can stop writing those emails right now. We have covered this on the show before. Alyssa, you have been covering this just forever. We have heard it all. We have seen it all. How do we regain control of the conversation? A bit hard to do in the middle of a television program when you're up against Natasha Lyonne. But what do we do in the larger cultural narrative to try to reclaim some sanity here?
I guess the one thing I was trying to say, as I was trying to, say that everybody deserves their own space and bring the safety aspect into it. And, I could have quoted all sorts of statistics. And during the dress rehearsal, I think too, what really resonated was saying that, some of the more shocking stats about in LA, we have, more people are killed by cars than homicides, which I think that really does get people's attention. Was that the right moment to bring that up? Probably not. But I think trying to refocus the conversation, as I was trying to do by saying, yes, space is a real problem, especially in a crowded city. But the problem is the single passenger vehicles, which we all know. And I don't think anybody disagrees with that anymore. I mean, I think you can really tell people, if you tell people that Uber is making traffic worse, which is, what I tried to frame everything I said around, which is true, and that they're spending, a lot of money to undermine public transit, which I tried to say, but then got interrupted, at the beginning. But I think people do really understand those things, but it's when you come up against somebody trying to make it about lanes, maybe that's the lane trap that we always fall into, you came here and rode these bike lanes with me here in LA on Hollywood Boulevard a couple of months ago. And, we're having fights, but they're not the exact same fights that are happening that from back then. But it's still this idea of, I guess, space. It's like a spatial disagreement about how space should be allocated. And I don't know how you get past that. I felt like I'd heard it all before, and I don't know. It's the lane trap. You can't really talk about lanes, perhaps. But then again, we're having great conversations here about bus lanes. We're putting in so many new bus lanes. We have this amazing enforcement. We're raising money for the city. Our city is broke, and bus lanes are one of these shining lights of revenue that's just pouring in. So I don't know. Maybe we are moving past it. Maybe people are finally getting it. But if you want to talk to anybody about taking away their space, I think that's the trap.
And the funny thing is, I think that people don't see the space that cars take up, because even Natasha Lyonne in that rant that she directs towards you and towards John Mulaney. She says, it's Manhattan. There's no space. And never once does she say that Cadillac Escalade that even in a New York City-based television show probably would have picked her up at her apartment to take her to, let's say, the ABC studios at Lincoln Square. That Cadillac Escalade is taking up tons of space. But to her, it doesn't even factor into the equation. She doesn't even see the car. The car is just part of the background. It used to be a yellow cab. Now it's an Uber. So what's the difference?
Yeah.
It's just part of the background. And the bicycle is this new thing, this outlier, this stranger that deserves to be like, let's just get rid of it. Let's just get all the bicycles to self-deport or, whatever it is that we're doing to people these days.
Although, how did people get like food delivery in New York all these years? I think the bikes were there. I'm like,
and that's the kind of funny thing. There's a moment where John Mulaney says, he sort of liked it when the bikes were just like sidewalk pirates, and he's basically referring to messengers, which I think is a great Mulaneyism, sidewalk pirates.
I liked it better when bikes were just sort of pirates going down the sidewalk. I prefer the sidewalk than them having their own
I'm so
lane.
glad we're focused, guys.
Yeah.
But then you even see a little bit of the sort of like, well, screw pedestrians mentality that sometimes informs community board meetings, because what he was saying was like, I preferred it when the bikes would just be like on the sidewalk. And and Natasha was just like, yeah, that would be better. Better for whom? The pedestrians? Certainly not.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to be like, don't we need wider side? I mean, I really think that it's like, I just want to reiterate, it's a comedy show. I'm not even sure if this is truly what any of these people believe. Although I'm sure, like Sigourney Weaver's comments about taxis, I do believe that. I think she, it's probably doesn't really know what these like ride-hailing apps are. Maybe like she might not have ever used them, which I think was going to be something so interesting to talk about. And I also appreciated that Richard tried to bring up Waymo, and then was kind of like cut off by John. Was like, no, it's Saymo. They have that delivery robot that they like always bring out as a bit.
How do you feel about the Waymo, the self-driving, since he's there?
Yeah.
This is not a Waymo. This is a Saymo. This is
robotic
delivery.
You're right.
And that would have also been, I think, a really interesting way to flip the conversation and be like, well, which cars do get to be on the road, and who feels safe going in which vehicle, and what does safety mean for what reasons? Because there's like I said at the very beginning, there's so many more options, even from when we first had this conversation in 2010, right? There's so many more things going on our streets. And it would have been great to talk about literally any one of those things instead of this like very old argument that.
I will say that as someone who respects your work and has been reading you for a long time, whenever you see a friend, a colleague, or even someone that you don't know but whose work you really like get the opportunity to be on a show like this, you think, oh gosh, there couldn't be a better person. Like that is exactly who we want to go, into the trenches to make the case on behalf of walking and cycling and better public transportation and better public space. You fought a valiant effort, but you just were sort of, like we said, exiled to one side of the set.
I like the exurbian. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But I did find it interesting. And this just happens all the time. The subject was, is Uber good? And it was just, but what about bicycles? Like somehow the mere talk of sharing the road with non-bicycle things turns into bicycles. We're finding this. Some people in reaction to the news that we're writing this book, Life After Cars, there are immediate responses, but not everyone can ride a bike. And we're like, you haven't even read the book. Actually, bikes don't make up a huge part of the argument that we're talking about here. They're just one piece. I'm reminded of Mayor de Blasio on The View with Whoopi Goldberg from a bunch of years ago, and he was there to talk about, I believe, healthcare and how the city was, in the face of all the stuff happening in Washington, trying to beef up its health insurance for low-income New Yorkers. And Whoopi saw this as an opportunity to just, she had the mayor's ear, and she's going to complain about bikes. And I feel like maybe Natasha has been holding on to this for a long time. Hey, we're here to talk about transportation. You know what? Bikes are transportation. I'm going to talk about that.
And also, like, I was so prepared to talk about, again, it's a comedy show, but I thought that, talking about is Uber good would open up all these really interesting conversations about, there's a huge wage theft case that's being settled. You've had one in New York too, right? like unionizing workers, like, and being able to collectively bargain for things. Like there are so many, like, I think good parallels to what they're facing as maybe actors, and to look at, transportation options that have, these harmful impacts to not just our cities, but to like the labor movement. So I was like, surely that will come up. And the guy, the one crew member, his dad called in, who was a Uber driver.
Hello, Larry in Philadelphia.
Hi, John.
Hi, how are you?
Good. I'm an Uber driver and always been afraid of the lack of conversation with my passengers, that they don't shut up the entire ride.
Oh, you don't want them to talk?
That was the thing too. Like usually the callers have questions for the expert, which that could have been bounced to me, but they only had one that was on topic, and the other two were like asking about completely different things.
Yes,
so they weren't even like, the calls weren't screened in a way that they had questions about Uber either. But yeah, I really wanted to ask that Uber driver, like if he felt like Uber was like stealing from him or something. That could have been such an interesting conversation to me personally. But
it's always a challenge when things turn into what you sort of don't want them to be, but you have to recognize what the thing was that you were in. I mean, Mulaney is a very good improviser. He's a great comedian. And there was a really good bit when you were all talking about Lime bikes and scooters, and there seemed to be a whole lot of confusion. Sigourney Weaver, again, brilliant person, but I don't expect her to know all that much about this. And then there was this sort of riff of like, does the Uber driver pick you up and you're on the back of the scooter? Like, and that was like, to me, a hilarious image that someone like Mulaney could have just played with for hours, probably, in a comedy show.
Do you ride on the back of the scooter with an Uber driver?
Yeah.
Very good
That's
question.
very When you open the app, it has all sorts of options. So it tells you, like, do you want 2 wheels or 4?
Oh, I didn't know anything about that.
But then the
That's
reason they do that is because they know that cars can't be a solution, right? It's easier to get between the traffic if you can go in the well-maintained bike lane that I'm sure you will all
It's not
be happy
well-maintained.
to go. Well, it should be.
Disagree.
Good
It
job.
should be.
Yeah, you want to just have fun with it and go with it, and you recognize that the questions are sort of just pretext for a fun conversation.
Yeah.
You're not there to solve transportation.
No, not at all. And the other really funny thing he said was when I was trying to say, like, reorganizing the street so people could have lanes and be safe. And he was like, what, this isn't like the model town in Beetlejuice, which I just thought was like the funniest. I was laughing so hard, but then I was like, wait, the Maitlands died in a car crash, like on the bridge.
Right,
like,
yes, yeah, exactly.
Completely not the safest place.
Perhaps if they had been on the back of an Uber scooter holding on to an Uber driver, they would have been safe. Okay, so, but like, here's the big question that I kind of come down to, which is this. We are saying this is completely unserious, but it remains true that more people will be seeing this show, even though it's streamed on Netflix, right? It's not like The Tonight Show, but it's still a really popular show. Then we'll listen to The War on Cars or perhaps read a Streets Blog article, like, let's just be honest. And it is an opportunity for our issues to get in front of people. And it is always a little disappointing when the conversation goes in this just, let's hate bikes, everybody. Don't we all hate bikes? Oh, and the studio audience like goes crazy, like a scene out of Idiocracy or something. How do we push back the narrative? Like, these changes are worth it. Uber is in fact not good. Wider bicycle lanes would be a solution to the problem that people like Natasha Lyonne are always complaining about. How do we seize control of these places so that it's not Natasha Lyonne dominating the conversation. It's the transit expert like you.
If you look everywhere but the actual show itself, and I have to say, like, a bunch of the crew members came up to me afterwards and were like, you were right. A bunch of the audience members were still there when I went, back down there, like, you were right. So the consensus was not, that I was wrong, even within the room itself. But the online feedback, I mean, there are like Reddit threads where like everyone is in agreement that, we should have bike lanes, and kind of arguing for exactly what we were talking about, like cars are not solutions for crowded cities. So let's, stop pouring money into those solutions, or those non-solutions. So I would say, like, I think the conversation really has shifted, and perhaps the people on that stage, who are all very lovely, by the way, like before and after, absolute thrill to hang out with them and talk to them, and you know, they were smiling while they were saying I was wrong, and I was smiling while they were saying, you know, I was saying they were wrong. But I really do think that just from the feedback that I've seen and gotten, the narrative has shifted. Like, a lot of people really are pretty rational in that what we're doing right now is not working, and that some changes are being made for the better. New York is probably the best example. I wish I could have talked about things like the decrease in honking, all those new studies from, you know, congestion pricing. It's not just that there are fewer cars and the buses are moving faster, but the quality of life is improving just on a block to block basis, you know, in Manhattan. So let's focus on the good things and keep bringing them up, even if we get shouted over.
Yeah. Well, I wonder then if that isn't another way in which this was all like a community board meeting, which is that you go to these meetings and people are screaming about bike lanes, and the people who are showing up are talking about almost being hit and just put the bike lanes on the sidewalk and all that stuff. But then you actually step outside into a transformed city and you see, oh, there's 10 people queued up at the light on their bikes. There's a kid on the bike lane that's just going to soccer practice that just last night everybody was screaming about. These people who don't have a platform and can't just like dominate, like look at camera one and say, get rid of all the bike lanes, they're not going to the meetings. They're not invited on the talk shows. And if you actually go out into reality, things are much better than they seem. So maybe that is the lesson of like, let's not get too fixated on the controversy and just try to bring it all back to reality as much as we can.
Yeah, I mean, the next morning, well, first of all, I took the train there. I took the bus and the train there, and I took the train home and then walked the rest of the way from the train station on the way home. When I was walking out, first of all, it's hard to get out of a studio because everybody drives in and out. So if you're on foot, they don't quite know what to do with you when you're leaving the studio. I was at Sunset Gower, like right in the middle of Hollywood, where I used to live. You know, where I first started taking the train all the time. So I kind of walked out of there.
Did you have to hang like a big parking visitor pass around your neck just to walk in the studio
yeah,
gates?
just to be able to go in there. Well, they have a special like side gate you have to walk through. But I went out, and there were like all these crew members who were out there, maybe like, you know, they were leaving and striking the set and everything, and they're like, where are you going? Are you getting an Uber? I'm like, no, I'm going to the train. They're like, okay, good job. Yeah, good, like awesome. And then I took the train home, and with, you know, like I said, the million people who ride transit every day in LA, we're not that, it's not that wild. And then I got home, and, you know, I got off the train and walked past like my local street vendor, and, you know, saw all these people out, you know, going to bars, and I was like, okay, like, yeah, this is the city that I want. This is what I was describing. And the next morning I had to go, you know, downtown, and got a Metro bike share bike, and got in that bike lane and making a video of tons of people in the bike lane with me. And I was like, yeah, I actually think, you know, give them a few years. They can see if congestion pricing really works in New York, and then maybe we can bring it some other places, and they'll know that I was right. They'll know.
I know that you're right. So that's important. You know, it's so funny because you're talking about movie studios. Movie studios are like these little cities, and you know what you often don't find in the middle of a movie studio? A lot of cars. You often find golf carts and bikes and people walking, and the only vehicles you see are service vehicles. And so in a way, I think, you know, we think about all of these places where human beings intuitively understand that cars don't make sense. And, you know, to quote Natasha Lyonne back to her, that like they take up too much space. There isn't enough space for automobiles in most situations where you have a lot of people. And it is funny that there often is that disconnect in places like Los Angeles, where people intuitively get it in the places they like to go, whether that's a movie studio or Venice Beach or Disneyland. But when it comes to just getting from point A to point B, they don't understand it in the same way.
Yeah, I totally brought that up in the dress rehearsal, because we were talking about, you know, exactly that. I was like, look how you get around on your own studio. You know that cars aren't going to work, and there's people just zipping around on golf carts everywhere. So yeah, I guess that can be my next big appearance. I can convince them to talk about golf carts, because I think that's my real obsession, my real propaganda I want to drop on everybody. Our golf cart's good.
Well, you were very brave to go on that show. I thought you did an excellent job. You know, like we said, it is a comedy show. It's not meant to be totally serious. I think you're also brave for coming on here immediately after. I don't want you to burn any bridges with the staff of John Mulaney's show. Like I said,
they were lovely.
Nothing but respect for him as a comedian,
yes.
for all of the people on the show as actors, and just sort of like cultural figures. All of them are welcome to come on the War on Cars to defend their positions. I'm happy to go on a bike ride with Natasha Lyonne.
Yeah, I do wonder like how. I mean, yes, like I said, everybody was lovely. The guests were all lovely. The producers and all the crew, just absolutely, just such a fun day. I was so grateful for the experience. There are just little things that even shows like that could do. Like, he asks everybody who calls in what kind of car they drive. You could just change that even very slightly.
How do you get around? Right.
How do you get around? Or you could just ask people, do you take transit? I mean, those little things do matter. And like I said, I don't think transit should be a punchline. Like, I don't think you should see him asking that as, you know, the gotcha joke, or that he was like making fun of me. I think it's like, if we are doing it, we should say it. And it's not that strange, because we have 1 million people doing it every day here in LA, more than Chicago now. So, you know, he's from Chicago. He should know that it's a really big deal to have this kind of transit ridership. We are now more of a transit city than Chicago. So deal with it.
Okay, so Alyssa, this is called the War on Cars, and you were sort of like the diplomat in the War on Cars. You were like our UN ambassador to Hollywood in many ways. There is a role that diplomacy does play, right? Like the stuff that you and I can say in this conversation on the War on Cars, or the things that you can write about in Torched, the medium is the message. So, you know, you could have gone on to John Mulaney's show, guns blazing, like, fuck you all, Sigourney Weaver, fuck you, get out of your cab. But, like, that would not have won you a whole lot of friends, I don't think.
Yeah, I'm sure I would not say that to Sigourney Weaver.
No, nor would I. But I do think there's a tendency of advocates to see an appearance like this, and some folks will say, well, why didn't she fight back harder? Why didn't she stick up? Again, I think you did an excellent job. I just want to lay this out there for the people who are like, oh, but it was such a missed opportunity. You know, how do you balance like going into the lion's den, let's say, and knowing when to pet the lion and knowing when to like stab it with a saber?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good way to think about it. That's what advocates are trained to do that, right? To find like common ground. I'm not sure that was exactly like the intention of this show. Missed opportunity, of course. Like, I wish I had said congestion pricing on late night television. That would have been the best. I tried so hard to get there. I wish I could have said that. Because that would have been an opportunity, like you said, to find common ground and say, hey, this is super popular. People love this and it's working. So let's talk about that. I really wanted to talk about solutions, which I think is, you know, usually the right way with these things. But yeah, the humor aspect of it, or like saying things with a smile without going all in on becoming like a ferocious advocate. Like I tried to say at the beginning of the episode, like I wanted to remind people that they had options, because having options is good. And I'm not sure we want Uber to be, you know, the only option that people think of when they're not driving their car. But I want people to know that, you know, the train is traveling right below them as they go to the studio in Hollywood, or that there is a Metro bike station and you can ride in these very nice bike lanes on Hollywood Boulevard that are right there. So just, I think like showing people through either, you know, our actions or our social media or our writing that there are other options, and they're fun and they're easy and they're cheaper in some cases.
Well, Alyssa, thank you for fighting the good fight, for bringing it to the people on John Mulaney's show. I thought you did an excellent job. John Mulaney, if you're listening, come on the show. I know you love cities, like you love New York, you love the subway. Let's talk about it. Alyssa, you're awesome. Really appreciate it. This was a wonderful conversation.
Thank you, Doug. So good to be here.
That's it for this episode of The War on Cars. You can find more from Alissa Walker and support her journalism with $10 off the price of a yearly subscription to torched.la by going to the link in the show notes, or, just going to torched.la. The War on Cars is produced with the generous support of the Helen and William Mazer Foundation and by listeners like you. Go to patreon.com/thewaroncarspod and support our independent podcast by becoming a member. You'll get exclusive bonus content, ad-free versions of regular episodes like this one, Discord access, merch discounts, and more. We thank our top Patreon supporters, Charlie G. of Human Powered Law in Portland, Oregon, Virginia Baker, and Mark Headland. And don't forget, our new book, Life After Cars, is now available for pre-order. To get your copy, ask for it at your local bookstore or go to lifeaftercars.com. Thanks also to Cleverhood. Save 15% off the best rain gear for cycling and walking with code JUNEBUG now through the end of June. Go to cleverhood.com/waroncars. And thanks to Extra Cycle. There has never been a better time to get an electric cargo bike, and the good people at Extra Cycle are ready to help you out. Take the ride guide and find the perfect Extra Cycle model for you and your family. Head to extracycle.com/thewaroncars. That's xtracycle.com/thewaroncars. This episode was produced and edited by me. Our music is by Nathaniel Goodyear. And on behalf of my co-host, Sarah Goodyear, I'm Doug Gordon, and this is The War on Cars.